You shall therefore lay up these words of mine in your heart and in your soul, and you shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall teach them to your children, talking of them when you are sitting in your house, and when you are walking by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise. Deuteronomy 11:18-19. For years, Carol Fern and her husband had the desire to raise a child of their own. Upon learning that Carol could not carry her own child, they decided to adopt a baby. Next slide. My name is Amy Bailey, and I am an attorney for the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, Local Union 10. It is my duty to support Carol Fern's contention that the Bainbridge Borough Council's vote to reject Mrs. Fern's request for unpaid maternity leave was a violation on many levels. I intend to argue on her behalf how these actions of the council violated the devotion of this loyal employee, the collective bargaining agreement between Local 10 and Bainbridge Borough, and ultimately how this vote is a violation of federal law. Next slide. On April 22nd of this year, Mrs. Fern was notified by her adoption agency that their dreams were about to come true. In 3 days, they could pick up their long-awaited baby girl and finally become mom and dad. This loyal employee, who has been a tax clerk for Bainbridge for 18 years, decided it would be unfair to leave Bainbridge in a bind since it was the busy tax season. She delayed her adoption a full week. She requested her 2 weeks of paid vacation and subsequently requested 6 months of unpaid maternity leave since, like any mother who would give birth, she had just had her baby. Next slide. It is my position that this violates Mrs. Fern's seniority as an employee, as well as the contracted leave agreement between Bainbridge and Local 10, and even the law when her request was rejected and she was instead offered 2 90-day reasonable purpose leaves. Because of her 18 years of loyal service, Mrs. Fern has earned seniority rights in the company. By denying her maternity leave and granting reasonable leave threatens her seniority rights against layoffs, which are protected in her contract. Mrs. Fern has earned her seniority rights, which lag behind men in many global markets. Additionally, this decision is a violation of Article 10, Section 5, which states that maternity leave shall be granted at the request of the employee for up to 6 months. Lastly, the decision will be shown to violate the Family Medical Leave Act. Next slide. Mrs. Fern's concern for her company's well-being during tax season does not seem to be reciprocated. Reasonable leave falls under the American Disabilities Act and was enacted to give certain disabled employees an opportunity to be medically treated for a predetermined amount of time and the opportunity to return to work. This amount of time is prearranged by request of the employee. However, it seems odd that instead of offering Mrs. Fern the full 180 days requested, that the council is offering her 2 90-day reasonable purpose leaves. Section 4A of the contract states that any extension beyond 90 days needs to be approved. It seems that this is an opportunity for the council after the first 90 days to claim undue hardship and then let Mrs. Fern go as an employee or reassign her, regardless of seniority, to an alternate assignment. This violates Mrs. Fern as a loyal employee and the seniority she has, as well as disregards her generous contributions to the company. Next slide. As a new mother, Mrs. Fern is entitled to maternity leave. Many countries, including our own, protect at least one of the parent's job during leave after the birth or adoption of a child. It is an atrocious miscalculation to insinuate that an adoptive parent would need less time to acclimate and bond to their new child than that of a birth parent. Withholding maternity leave is not only a violation of her contract, but a violation of her role as a new mother. Next slide. The Family Medical Leave Act provides certain employees up to 12 weeks of unpaid job-protected leave per year. According to FMLA guidelines, federal guidelines, Mrs. Fern is entitled to this leave because the birth or adoption of a child is a triggering circumstance. The Council blatantly violated a federal law enacted by Congress in voting that she was not permitted to take this type of leave. Next slide. As we consider a path forward, it must be said that many would argue that collective bargaining is a human right and not simply a privilege. Mrs. Fern has the right to maintain her hard-earned seniority of 18 years. Mrs. Fern has the right to keep her job and return to her position. Mrs. Fern has the right to FMLA mandated maternity leave. These are all rights that have been established as part of her contract with Bainbridge Borough. Next slide. Mrs. Fern simply wants to spend time at home with her child under the coverage and protection of maternity leave. Her FMLA must be retroactively set to begin on May 18th and be in place for 12 weeks. Mrs. Fern concedes that the first 12 weeks of leave will be protected by FMLA, while the remaining leave protected under the Article 10.5 maternity leave of the contract bargained in good faith. We will also waive off reporting this violation to FMLA to the U.S. Department of Labor. Further, we would like FMLA posters hung in prominent places in the workplace. Next slide. Mrs. Fern deserves to have time off with her new child. For 18 years, she has been a faithful employee for the Bainbridge Borough. As a member of the AFSCME, she is covered under the collective bargaining agreement and deserves maternity leave granted her by FMLA as well as the good faith provisions of her contract.